Hello and welcome to Protect Ukraine Now YouTube channel. I am excited to share with you an interview with Carl Larson from a Ukraine Defense Support Organization in Seattle. This interview was conducted by Sergey Lubarsky, the founder of Protect Ukraine Now and an outspoken supporter of Ukraine. This is an excellent interview from many perspectives, so please watch it to the end. I also would like you to pay close attention to where Carl is talking about political advocacy. 2024 is going to be a very challenging year, and you have heard from many people, myself included, about the need to call for Ukraine. In this interview, Carl is going to explain in greater details why political advocacy is critical and effective.
Sergey. So first of all, I want to thank you for having me on your program. I think it's a very important and interesting audience to reach. A little background, my name is Carl Larson. I'm born and raised in Seattle, Washington, in the Northwest of the United States. 20 years ago, I was in the U.S. Army for a short stint for 3 years, 2001 to 2004. Unfortunately, that stint coincided with it coincided with 9/11, and so I got to spend one of those years in what we called the sandbox in Iraq. And so I did my time there, and then got back and left the service and went off to start a career and everything. And then fast forward 20 years to Putin's invasion in 2022, and I was very calculated about my involvement in the Ukrainian military. This was not some decision I took lightly, unlike, I would say, a lot of the other soldiers, international volunteer soldiers. But I mean, the three of us crossed the border from Poland into Ukraine March 8th, 2022. And at the time, if you think back, we all thought that Kyiv was imminently about to fall. There was this huge 30-kilometer convoy coming down from Belarus, and the Ukrainians were putting up a really good fight, but we all were concerned that it was not going to work out. And so we thought it was every man on deck, and that those of us who were experienced combat veterans in either the U.S. or other international militaries. One of the gentlemen I went over there with was American, and then the other was British. So, and they both had military experience. One had combat experience, like myself. And so we thought that we would make a direct personal impact upon Ukraine's ability to defend itself, and that it was coming down to the few people. You recall at the time, the Ukrainian military was handing out AKs from the back of trucks, and there were civilians, in civilian clothing, directly involved with stopping the, I want to say Iraqis, the orcs, the Russians coming from Belarus. And so we tried to get in as soon as possible and get involved. Now, I will tell you, we did not have such a positive experience upon our first introduction to the International Legion. I can't share the exact details about how you join the Legion, but I can say in broad terms, there's a established process. You reach out to your country, the Ukrainian embassy in your country, and they tell you where to go and who to talk to, and there's some passwords involved and such. But when we first were in the recruitment center, there by the Polish border, we talked to the other recruits, and we were rapidly horrified to see that they were not men that you'd want to share a foxhole with. There was a lot of concerns about some of their mental fitness, and there were some that were obviously drug addicts and criminals and suicidal and such. And so the other two gentlemen got discouraged. Well, we all three left. And then we bummed around Western Ukraine for a while. We went to Uzhhorod, we went to Lviv, and we tried to volunteer with various humanitarian NGOs. And the other two got discouraged, and they went home. And I decided to go and volunteer with the recruitment center, the Legion Recruitment Center. I can't say the town, but it's near the Polish border, as you'd imagine, and work on trying to improve the Legion's screening process. And so I did that for 3 weeks, learned a lot, had a lot of crazy adventures, met a lot of great people and some not so great people, and did improve the screening process. And at the end of those 3 weeks, the quality of the recruits coming in was so much better that I felt that I could trust my life with these other men. And we had a fantastic platoon commander who I really trusted, and I still stay in touch with him. He's a great guy. So at that point, I decided I could join. I was pretty careful about it. I didn't just rush over there, grab a rifle, and run at the front lines. But I know some guys who did, and things sometimes didn't turn out so well for them.
I'm sure there's going to be some Russians who are watching this program, and he's going to at least imply that you're a mercenary. You get paid. Your decision to go there are purely financial, or they might say Uncle Sam was behind you, or you're the CIA, or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah, trust me, if I was going there for the money, I sure failed. I'm a bad accountant. I've spent over 100, my wife and I added it up. We've spent over $140,000 on this. I had to take a 8-month leave of absence from my day job. I left about $20,000 worth of equipment there, numerous drones there. You know, I did not bring home practically anything. I spent a huge amount of money.
So you spent
wife,
a huge amount of your own money. Nobody paid you,
no,
right?
no,
That's your money. You didn't speak any Ukrainian.
no,
You
I
have
don't speak Ukrainian or Russian, just
none
some
of it.
basic terms.
You have no cultural, ethnic
No,
background connection with these people. Have you
no,
ever been to Ukraine before?
no, never. But I went to Ukraine because Ukraine is fighting for America. They're fighting for democracy around the world, not just for Ukraine. I went to Ukraine to protect democracy, especially here in America, not just for Ukraine. I believe the Ukrainians are defending our freedom, not just theirs.
So many people in the United States may not share this view. Could you explain why you believe that supporting Ukraine in this conflict directly related to safeguarding American security and freedom?
Well, I think there's many ways in which Ukraine's security is also America's national security and in America's national interest. First of all, if Ukraine loses and Putin triumphs in Ukraine, it will be the start of a new Cold War along the Polish, Baltic, and Romanian borders. The United States will have to spend trillions of dollars to recreate the bases that we built in Germany, primarily in Germany, around all during the Cold War. We will have to move those up to Poland and the Baltic states and Romania and staff those with the hundreds of thousands of American soldiers that we had there all through up until the 1980s. It will be enormously expensive, and the likelihood of future conflicts between Russia and American soldiers will be as high as it was during the Cold War. We know how tense it was and how risky and how close to World War III we came during that period. Defeating the Russians in Ukraine stops that. Defeating the Russians there, even if Ukraine does not ever become part of NATO, stopping Putin's international ambitions in Ukraine means that he is very unlikely to attack Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, to get adventuresome in Transnistria, Georgia. It stops him and his plans, and it also stops, or at least warns, China not to get ideas about Taiwan. It stops North Korea not to get ideas about South Korea. All around the world, all these dictators and all these anti-democratic authoritarians, they're all coming together. Look at it. Hamas, Iran, Russia, North Korea, they're all coming together because they realize they have a common enemy in democracy, and they're working together. And if we allow Ukraine to fail then we have sent a signal to the world that America is weak, America is self-absorbed and cannot be trusted, and that the authoritarians have the upper hand. We can't send that signal. It will result in enormous amounts more lost money and American lives in the future. The obvious parallel between Ukraine in 2024 is Czechoslovakia in 1939, right? 1938, 1939. It's an obvious parallel. You have to stop the invader sooner. The sooner you stop him, the less bloodshed and money you will spend.
Carl, we never talk about this, but you literally verbatim, word for word, said exactly what I keep saying in my channel. Literally, just like somebody will think we choreographed that, which we didn't.
We didn't.
It's exactly my message, yes. But let me ask you this question. You've met a bunch of people from all around the world, the Foreign Legion. From your experience, is it the best use of foreign fighters, putting them in the front line?
You know, when I first joined the Legion, I was frustrated that there were so many highly skilled people who were just at the front holding a rifle. In case anyone is listening to this or watching this who is considering joining the Legion, you have to be aware it doesn't matter if you were a nuclear power technician or a scientist or you were a plumber. You will be handed an AK-74 rifle, given some basic equipment, a couple weeks of training, and sent to the front lines. That's the function of the International Legion. It is a light infantry unit. And this was frustrating to me in the beginning, but as I began to understand how the Legion played its role, I started to realize that this actually makes sense, because the Legion, although it does very good work, is very limited by the fact that these are not Ukrainian citizens. They do not speak Ukrainian. We don't speak Ukrainian or Russian. There's a separate Legion for Russian-speaking, primarily legionnaires, usually from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and some from Russia, actually. That's a whole separate topic. But we don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, so our ability to do these high-skilled jobs is very limited. And so the primary need right now in Ukraine is for frontline infantry soldiers. So that makes sense. Yeah, so this is something I'm actually very passionate about. I think that there is a real opportunity for these international soldiers, once they've done some time at the front lines, to go back home and advocate to to the publics and to their national public, and also to their national governments, that more support for Ukraine is needed. And we're working right now. Actually, I had a phone call yesterday with several German former soldiers in Ukraine who are now advocating to the Bundesrat, I think it's called, the German parliament, to try to push them for greater support for Ukraine. So I think there is a need there and an opportunity. But the primary need Ukraine has right now is for more soldiers at the front.
Fair enough. So now you're back home. You are extremely active. Like, I don't know, it's your full-time job or not, but you're very active in supporting Ukraine. You've met with people of Congress. You met with politicians. Based on those interactions, based on your insight, what is your assessment of the current situation regarding their financial and military aid to Ukraine? Where do we stand?
Well, I will be honest, Sergey. I'm not a optimist. I think 2024. I mean, I'm a long-term optimist for Ukraine, but I think in the short term 2024 is going to be a difficult year for Ukraine. There are a number of factors that are coming together to make it a difficult year. Just donor fatigue, and the fact that the Israel-Gaza conflict is taken up a lot of the newspapers, and but let's talk about what you asked about, which is support in Congress. So support in Congress roughly mirrors the level of support in the American public, and unfortunately, there is a lot of very strong and effective pro-Russia propaganda here in the United States. It's very effective, and it's in both parties. It's both on the far left in the Democrats, but also in the Republican Party, and it's much more effective in the Republican Party. And that's why you can see support for Ukraine amongst Republicans has dropped from over 50% at the start of the invasion to right around 30% now. And so there is a very strong wing of the Republican Party that wants zero aid to go to Ukraine and is fighting this new supplemental aid package. And I see that getting worse, actually, and getting less support in the future. And that's why it's so important for major European countries to step up, because they're really the ones who are going to lose the most if Russia wins. So they really need to restart their defense industries and spend a lot more money. They've been kind of coasting, as we would say, for decades and relying on the American military umbrella, and they can't do that anymore.
So I have about a big bunch of people who are watching me from the United States, basically people like myself, immigrants, and they get fatigue. I keep telling them to call their representatives, call their senators, send them emails. What I'm getting back, it's not explicit, but like, what good does it do? So my question to you, does it make a difference or it's useless?
Oh, good Lord, it makes a huge difference. So in the politicians that we've met with, and I've personally met with over 30 politicians and many, many more times their staffers. And we keep hearing over and over that the phone calls and the emails are how they base their decisions. And unfortunately, the ratio of pro-Ukraine phone calls and emails is much less than the ratio of pro-Putin, anti-Ukraine phone calls and emails. So the ratio that I've heard is that Democrats get about 3 anti-Ukraine calls for every 1 pro-Ukraine call, but Republicans get 10 to 30 anti-Ukraine calls to every 1 pro-Ukraine call, if you can believe that.
No, I cannot. Tucker Carlson, Robert Kennedy, who are actively lobbying to tank Ukraine, to sink Ukraine.
Yep.
Could it be Russian propaganda, or they just simply useful idiots?
I don't think that they're stupid. I think they're very calculated. There are some useful idiots here who are directly tied to Russia. So Jordan Peterson, he had a medical problem and he received treatment in Serbia, I believe it was, and there's evidence that he was turned, and that he was offered some quid pro quo, and after that trip he suddenly became very pro-Russia. The people who have the huge impact, like you mentioned, Kennedy and Tucker Carlson, those two have a huge impact. And I do not believe there are any direct ties to Russia for either of them. They've been very careful to avoid that for obvious reasons, because they would get a lot of criticism if that was found out. I think what those people do is they have just identified an opportunity to make a difference between them and the mainstream and tap into a lot of the populist anger here in America. As you probably know, but your viewers may not know, maybe those outside of America may not know, America is more divided now probably than any time since Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And it's so divided that we may have a civil war in the future. I hope it does not happen. God willing, it does not, but we may. And this next election here in November of this year may be just a horrendous situation. So these people, Tucker Carlson and Kennedy, they are opportunists. They have realized that there's a lot of angry people who don't know what to be angry about, and they give them something to be angry about. They give them a scapegoat. And in this case, Ukraine has become the scapegoat.
The Ukrainian government should or could do better, more efficiently.
Oh, well, you said it, more efficiently. There's the Ukrainian government, it's a developing country. Americans have to realize that, it's not a rich country, and it's only recently emerged from the Soviet system. And the Soviet system is still very embedded in a lot of older people's heads. And so it's not a country that is prizing efficiency. You know, they place a higher value on loyalty and on tradition and on stability and on consistency and hierarchy. So they tend not to be as collaborative as we Americans are. That said, there's some wonderful things about the Ukrainian culture that we Americans could learn from them. And I've made some amazing friends over there, lifelong friends that I have so much respect for. I have many examples of inefficiency in the Ukrainian military. I could literally write a book about it. I have reports that were written, like 20-page reports written by my commanding officer about inefficiency, about corruption, about to give you just one quick example, we met, I shouldn't say exactly who, we met at the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C. with some highly placed Ukrainian government officials. And we shared with them 27 signed stamped requests for equipment from Ukrainian military commanders. These are battalion commanders. And we gave them the printed copies. And I said that I could email them and put them in touch. It all has the phone numbers of the battalion commanders. And these are requests, for the same standard stuff: drones, night vision, vehicles, winter clothing, medical supplies, just standard stuff. Every single one is the same, almost the same request. And they told me, they have to submit this through the MOD, the Ukrainian MOD. And I say, well, of course they have. This one did 3 months ago. This one did 6 months ago. This one did 9 months ago. And they say, well, it will go through the system when it goes through the system. And I told them, well, a month ago, I met with Representative Adam Smith here in Seattle, who is the head of he's the ranking member of the House Armed Forces Committee. He doesn't decide how much money, but he decides how that money is spent. And he could easily fill these requests, easily. So how do we get the Ukrainian government to include these requests? And they told me it's not possible. It has to go through the MOD, even if it takes months and or doesn't happen. And they told me very proudly that only 3 people in the entire Ukrainian government could sign off on equipment. And to them, this was such a smart thing, because it meant that corruption was so unlikely. And to me and everyone else who was sitting, there were 6 other people sitting, we were like, 3 people. No wonder this hasn't happened in 6 months, because it's so inefficient. Can you imagine the line of papers that must be on this person's desk, like this Ministry of Defense person? And so, of course, things don't happen. So that would be the number one thing, is greater efficiency. If there was some way that I could somehow convey that to members of the Rada, but I don't.
Can you describe in your words, what do we do? What's our daily grind? How do we impact the political process?
Oh, you mean the American Coalition?
Yes, American Coalition for Ukraine.
Yeah, sure. So the American Coalition for Ukraine is an umbrella group of over 100 other organizations, including my organization in Seattle, Ukraine Defense Support. And so what the American Coalition does is advocates for Ukraine to the American government. And this is so important and so impactful. And I'm so thankful that the American Coalition exists, because let me tell you, I have a lot of Canadian Legion brothers, and I have a lot of German and French and British. Nothing like this exists anywhere else in the world. If it does, I have never found it, and I've done a lot of looking. So we're very lucky to have the coalition. And what the coalition does is tries to get the American government to better support Ukraine with more weapons and more equipment, more support at the United Nations, and just more support. And what does this mean in real life? Well, it means a lot of meetings, a lot of side conversations, a lot of relationship building, a lot of advocacy with Congress. And I'm happy to go into detail about that, or
please do. What is advocacy? You can realize that most people from post-Soviet Russia or post-Soviet Ukraine had no idea what advocacy means. To them, it's a legal defense.
Sure. So to explain advocacy, I have to explain lobbying. So lobbying, we don't say lobbying, because technically speaking, here in the United States, to be a lobbyist, you have to be registered to lobby. So I'm not a lobbyist. If I was, I would have to register. I'm an advocate. So that's what we do is we go and we meet with members of Congress. So the American political system responds to two things: money and constituent pressure. So, and we don't have a lot of money, but we do have a lot of constituents. There are a lot of Americans, Ukrainian Americans like you, and American, non-Ukrainian Americans like me, who feel passionately about supporting Ukraine. And there's there's a pretty well thought out strategy to meet with members of Congress and to push particular bills. And the American Coalition has a list of about a dozen bills that we're trying to get through Congress. And it's a challenging process. The bills have to start in either the House of Representatives or the Senate, and they have to go through various committees. And then when they get through one house, then they have to get joined with the bill from the other house, or they have to go past to the other house, and then Biden has to sign it. So there's a whole process to this, and you can put pressure on the right members of Congress at different stages along the way. There's ways to either meet with them or meet with their staffers, or attend certain public events and make public comment, or you can talk to their donors, or you can mobilize constituent pressure from their home districts. We found that to be very effective. Congress people usually respond if several hundred of their constituents from their home district call them and say, we want you to vote this way on this bill. They oftentimes are responsive to that. So we're pretty good at that. So that's the other way to do it is much simpler, which is just to spend a lot of money. But we don't have a lot of money to spend, so we do it the hard way.
Carl, is there anything the viewers of this program, people who listen to you right now, can do financially to help to your cause?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking that, Sergey. So there are many ways that people can help Ukraine. So my group, we focus on three main ways to help Ukraine. The first is we buy equipment and send it to Ukrainian military units. We don't focus on humanitarian aid or refugees because there's already a lot of groups doing that. There's hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars from private organizations supporting refugees and humanitarian aid. And that's important, but it's not what we focus on. We focus on winning the war. And I can tell you from personal experience, Ukraine soldiers need as much help there as possible. I've been at the front lines. I've seen Ukrainian soldiers in the snow wearing tennis shoes. I've seen them carrying their equipment in shopping bags because they did not have a backpack. Of course, they open the trunk of the old Lada and two guys sit in the trunk, and then you have 4 or 5 or even 6 guys in the old Lada, and then you have 2 guys holding onto a strap on the top. And people in America say, "Oh, we've sent them, 80 I forget the exact total, but $80 billion or something. They must all be driving in gold-plated tanks over there." And that is not the case, trust me. So we send a lot of drones, night vision, vehicles, medical supplies, winter clothing. Definitely donating is the easiest way to help Ukraine win the war. Yes, and that'll go directly to equipment. The other way to help, and something that I think most pro-Ukraine groups don't provide, and that we provide, is ways for people to volunteer. So anyone can volunteer to help Ukraine from anywhere in the world, whether they speak English or not. If your listeners and if your viewers only speak Ukrainian or only speak Russian, they can still get involved. There's many ways to help. They can help by contacting news media, by doing internet research, by identifying potential donors, by identifying opportunities to buy inexpensive equipment, by working with we work with many groups all around the world that are buying drones, doing electrical in-depth research on drone jammers, drone detectors, FPV drones. There is a way for anyone to help.
Well, first of all, I really want to sincerely thank you for your service. That is extraordinary. In my opinion, it's extraordinary to go fight for land you've never been to, have no connection to.
Do перемоги.
До перемоги. Дуже дякую, дуже дякую. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you, Sergey.